Tangata Whenua.
People of the land.
The indigenous people of Aotearoa.
Māori.
Within their indigenous lands, Māori culture has descended into outgroups, allowing for cultural biases to expand rapidly.
Divergence began in Aotearoa within extremities of derogatory labels enacting infra-humanising effects.
We can see this from the late 1800 New Zealand land wars through events such as the atrocities in Parihaka and the decline of Te Reo Māori.
Māori has become a minority language and culture within their own whenua, due to indifference and divergent attitudes toward New Zealand's indigenous people as a dominant social trait.
The diminishing of Māori people throughout New Zealand has meant that they are more subjected to derogatory stereotypes as they have fallen into a minority group over the last century.
In contemporary times, this has led Māori people to fall into poverty and oppression, masked over with New Zealand's multi-ethnic label.
This has rippled throughout the education system as well as within Oranga Tamariki, and Pākehā claim that not all of us are prejudiced, which lacks explicit acknowledgement of white privilege.
We can witness the veiling of racism towards Māori people through the so-called inclusion of Māori language within public spaces. In contrast, the language itself has become lost within an English-dominated society.
Discrimination has meant that there is a negative communicative behaviour exchange contributing to a perception of in-groups and out-groups within our whenua, distinguishing an us and them dichotomy.
The Māori language has been long contained within society in Aotearoa. The Māori language became confined to small areas, particularly where iwi held a lot of land.
Situational features of the intercultural competence model shows that the environmental context of institutionalised racism led to the steep decline of Te Reo Māori.
In today's society, the language is seldom used.
Kura kaupapa have become a less sought-out option outside of areas where there are a large majority of Māori people.
There has also been a long-standing issue around the usage of Te Reo Māori in public format.
Because Māori language is seldom used, Aotearoa is also losing its knowledge of Māori culture, values, beliefs and behaviours.
This diminishes our cultural hybridity and ability to communicate effectively between Māori and Pākehā.
This is not helped by the lack of usage of Māori place names, with them either being ignored or too long in the cases of places such as Tāmaki Makaurau.
Discrimination against Indigenous Māori has grown from a long and systematic process in which there has been severe oppression.
Some would argue to the point of which they have lost touch with their own culture. Aotearoa's history is full of misunderstandings and multiple cases of intercultural conflict.
The signing of the Treaty of Waitangi, New Zealand's founding document, had extensive repercussions and led to the New Zealand Wars, as both sides were focused too heavily on their different worldviews.
There was a lot of cross-cultural miscommunication around land ownership and sovereignty, as both parties understood these terms differently.
Ethnocentrism is seeing oneself and their culture as superior over others in terms of beliefs, language and customs. It is also holding perceptions of attitudes and behaviours to benefit the in-group of the given society. This action is a significant contribution to continuing verbal misunderstandings between Pākehā and Māori, which is almost always at the expense of Māori.
Specifically within contemporary times, Māori beliefs, such as land and people being closely spiritually linked, are not appreciated by capitalistic tourism, which in Aotearoa gets emphasised heavily.
The tourism industry utilises Māori culture to portray a positive face that Pākehā and Māori, despite colonisation, have equal inclusivity in society, which is a facade. It just makes money. But how are Pākehā continuing ethnocentric views upon Aotearoa's Indigenous people? There is no definite answer as to why. Could be to cover the atrocities that Pākehā committed in the past, could be institutionalised racism and microaggressions. But how do we see it?
Oranga Tamariki, unequal education systems, and horrifying incarceration statistics are just a few results of Pākehā ethnocentrism, which allows them to put Māori below their status.
Colonial capitalism has left Māori culture and language as a vulnerable outgroup, which has plastered them with degrading stereotypes that became norms and expectations in New Zealand.
Small, oppressive, and often subconscious behaviours, such as place name pronunciation, asserts westernised dominance within Aotearoa.
These behaviours show blatant disregard and disrespect for Māori people, as well as everything they stand for as a culture.
This behaviour is influencing what is happening on other levels throughout New Zealand society.
In our education sector, we can witness that Māori is in the outer group of New Zealand society, especially as the feeling of isolation is a critical issue for students.
A recent study found that a large proportion of Māori students who went to a predominantly Pākehā school felt marginalised and struggled to relate to the system.
The divergence between Māori and Pākehā in schooling, whether conscious or subconscious, hinders Māori students as they can lose their confidence within themselves and their courage to ask for help.
Only 33% of Māori attain NCEA Level 3 compared to the national average of 57%. These poor results are a notable factor for the low rates of Māori employment and a result of a lack of intercultural competence.
Society predominantly claims the reason for Māori academic lag is due to socio-economic issues. However, we must acknowledge the underlying theme of inferiority towards Māori in school.
Pākehā perception within Aotearoa has created a social ideology which associates Māori in a criminalistic manner.
While Māori only make up 15% of our country's population, they are severely overrepresented within the imprisonment population. Over 50% of people incarcerated are of Māori ethnicity. This extends to a gender division where the racial imbalance is more impactful on wahine.
This social categorisation is an example of a lack of psychomotor features of intercultural competence. This leads Māori to non-verbally perform these stereotypes as they are perceived to be the only options given to them.
Intercultural communicative incompetence is seen through colonial attitudes today. The oppression of Te Reo Māori enables institutionalised racism to continue.
As a dying language, directly as a result of violent colonisation, outsiders cannot shift their prior knowledge of Māori experiences to avoid intercultural conflict.
It indirectly enforces that cultural ideologies are incompatible, which has set situational norms, rituals, customs, and even styles face-to-face within a socio-historical affected system.
Tangata Whenua.
People of the land.
Victims of intercultural conflict.
Aotearoa must change.